welcome to That Will Never Work. I'm kind of eager to talk to you because I think you're, I guess, what I kind of conceive of a blank canvas type of guests, which is kind of, I won't say just starting out because you sounds like you're reasonably far down the road, but you're right at that point. You're going, okay, now what do I do? So with that as your intro, what I'd love you to kick us off with is, first of all, start off with what is the problem you were trying to solve? Give me a quick idea of what you're doing, and then maybe we could kind of neatly segue into what it is you want to talk about.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I'm super excited. This is a thrill just talking to you. So, my whole life, I've been a musician, a drummer. I started playing drums at the age of 9, played all throughout school, moved to New York, and went to music schools, and really saw myself as just kind of a professional musician trying to make it in the New York scene. And pretty early on, I joined the band St. Lucia in about 2014, and we started touring, which was really exciting, well-known band. But I kind of realized, I needed more. I was kind of tired of just relying on playing live shows for income. And I realized I needed some sort of multiple sources of income because it was kind of feast or famine. It's like you get a tour and you have some income coming in, but if you're not touring, it's like, what am I going to do? So in 2019, I started building my own private drum studio, just drum students. And I rented out a studio in Midtown Manhattan and started teaching drum lessons. And by the end of 2019, I had about 16 of my own private students. And I kind of had the goal of, all right, it's going well with drums. Maybe in 2020, I'll start a drum school. And then, as we all know, March of 2020 hit and COVID hit, and it was lockdown time. And I was panicked, like, what am I going to do? I'm teaching all these in-person lessons. What's going on? Am I going to lose all my students? Thankfully, most of my students moved virtually. They were open to trying Zoom. So that started to happen. So I kind of kept most of my students. And I was talking to one of my friends one day on the phone, a musician friend. He's like, man, I'm in Ohio. He used to play on Broadway. He's like, I have no gigs happening. I'm kind of just hanging at home. There's nothing going on. And I had the idea. I'm like, hey, if I could get you some guitar students, would you want to work with me? He's like, yeah, if you can give me some guitar students, I would love to work with you. So I started promoting guitar and started feeding him students. He started getting students. And then I had the idea, well, if it's working with him, maybe I can call some other friends and see if they'd be interested in working with me. So I called a vocal teacher, started to build out her schedule. And before I know it, I starting this virtual music school. And I kind of rebranded my website and started to promote as a virtual music school. And now we have over 50 students taking virtual lessons, drum lessons, guitar lessons, vocal lessons. I have a few other drum instructors, and it is an actual virtual music school. So it really started as just a way of kind of a multiple source of income. So I wasn't just relying on touring. And then when COVID hit, it really started to turn into a business. And now I'm just as excited about this as I am playing drums for bands. I mean, it's just a thrill to get up in the morning.
Wow. Well, that's quite the saga. But listen, since you're a drummer, I've got to ask the question that is on everybody's minds. Sound of Metal or Whiplash?
Oh, I love Whiplash. That's one of my favorite movies. To be honest, I'm kind of I haven't watched Sound of Metal yet because I'm kind of afraid to watch it because I would be like, I could see myself like, don't play too loud or you'll go deaf. But, so I'm like, I'm going to stay away from that one. But yeah, Whiplash, I love. Great movie.
That's clearly the question. Well, yeah, listen, ones you lose your hearing, the others you lose your mind. I mean, in a way. So,
yes,
either both are cautionary tales. But listen, for those of you who are listening who have not seen either of those movies, they are both incredibly great, incredibly intense, and do have drumming at the heart of them.
They do.
So, by luck, you've stumbled into what feels like a really cool niche, which is basically being this site which helps match up people who want to take lessons with people who want to teach them.
Yes.
And it sounds like it's going great. What's the problem?
I have built it to this level. Like I said, 50 students. And I'm really interested in how to get to the next level, something that's bigger, potentially hundreds, even thousands of students. And once again, these are one-on-one lessons. So it's not like a website where you pay a subscription and there's all these stock videos. These are one-on-one lessons. So obviously it's contacting more teachers is a big part of it, but I'm interested in ways to reach more students and marketing strategies, because I know the market is out there. It's more just finding ways to reach it.
That's a marketing problem, but I'm gonna start with a deeper one.
Sure.
Which is, what do you want? Why are you doing this? What's your end game? I mean, do you want to be a full-time entrepreneur this way? Are you looking for this to be a lifestyle business? Is this something to do on the side while you're between tours? I mean, have you thought that through?
Sure. I was actually thinking about it before this call. And you said it perfectly. In some ways, I kind of stumbled into this business. But since I've started, something about it really feels right and natural to me. Something just feels right. My father's in business. A lot of my family members are in business. And I've always felt like I have kind of natural salesman skills and have had it kind of in my heart. And in some ways, running this business feels even more natural than playing the drum. So I would answer your question saying, if I could turn this into a full-blown business, I would do it and be an entrepreneur and have this be my main end game, this business.
And obviously, I do have some thoughts about this, but a couple more questions. To what degree do you think this early traction you've seen is COVID-driven? Or do you think you've stumbled on a truly fundamentally better way to learn?
Well, I was talking to one of the guitar students who lives in Germany recently, and she was saying, what's so incredible about this is I'm studying with a guitar player who plays on Broadway. And I live in this small town in Germany. And it's like I would never have access to a teacher like that in Germany, but because of virtual lessons, I have access to them. So I was kind of worried about that. I was like, man, maybe everyone's just doing this because of COVID, and when they let up, people aren't going to want to have virtual lessons. But I haven't found in any ways that it's slowed down since they've kind of opened up the world again. So I think I found a very convenient way for people to study with top-notch instructors.
And now my other question, this is a common one that I'll ask someone who's in your circumstance. What else is out there that does what you do? Is this a new idea? You think you're the first person who's thought about doing virtual music lessons?
I don't think I'm the first person, no. And I've looked online and I've seen some other virtual music schools. And School of Rock, which is more known for kind of putting bands together, of young bands making rock bands, I think they're offering virtual lessons as well. But I've noticed that the big players in the market seem to be content-based websites where someone pays a subscription, monthly subscription, and there's all these stock videos. So there's some really big websites for that. Drumeo is one where I can go on and watch some of the best drummers in the world. But I don't get to study with them one-on-one. It's just an hour-long video that I could watch.
And so the question I have to ask, which is a common one, is do you think this is a really novel idea? In other words, oh my gosh, no one's ever thought of the idea of doing virtual lessons before. And that's why there aren't any big established companies doing this. Or do you think it's been tried many times in the past because it's a reasonably obvious idea, and there's some other fundamental reason why you don't see other big competitors that you've figured out the answer to?
I'm going to be honest with you, I don't totally know the answer to that question. I think in a lot of ways, Zoom has made it a lot easier to do this. I think Skype and some other types of kind of virtual ways of communicating with people aren't as good as Zoom. So I think that's kind of opened up the doors, which is why it's more of a recent discovery. But I do pride myself in trying to hire teachers that have at least bachelor's or master's in music, and just really top level teachers who can really tailor make their lessons to the student. So it's not some stock lesson. They really get to know the students. They have a relationship with them, and they're really just stellar musicians. So I kind of pride myself in hiring, to the best of my ability, the best people that are just at the top of their game.
So the reason I asked that question is, when you want to know what is the next level, to get to the next level, you have to understand the answer to that question I asked you a moment ago, which is, why don't I see it already? And you could say, well, because no one's ever thought of this before. But I hate to break it to you, Dustin. I'm going to guess a lot of people have thought of this idea before. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, wow, we overlooked this. I doubt it. And so what you really have to understand is what has been tried, or what were the assumptions that didn't work? What am I doing differently? Not that you need to do something differently from what you're doing now, but you have to understand which aspect of what you're doing is the truly unique and powerful thing that's making yours work where others haven't worked. Because it's reasonably easy sometimes to start something at a small scale. Did you say you have 50 or 500 different students?
50.
I missed the scale. You have 50 students. That can be pulled together on power of persuasion.
Sure.
At 500, probably still could do it by force of your personal network. 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, those have to happen through virality, through network effect, through things that are going to be dynamic in the power of the idea itself. And so there's so many components to what you're doing that you don't recognize yet how many different things that you've just by chance done it a certain way that's worked. But you need to know what those are so you can make sure that you not only keep on doing them, but you double down on them. And there's a couple things to that. So you threw one thing out that you thought it might be, which is technological progress, which is, of course, a very real possibility. I mean, people sometimes overlook that. As you know, the podcast is called That Will Never Work, and the book is called That Will Never Work. And it's because everyone always says that will never work to every possible new idea. And it's not that the people who say that are ignorant. It's that all of us rely on some level of pattern recognition. I mean, the reason that I actually can do what I do as a mentor is the fact that I've seen so much. And I've seen what's worked and what hasn't worked, and I can kind of quickly begin to get a sense of, this is a path that might be effective. But the thing that I have to be so careful about all the time is to make sure I don't apply patterns that I learned 5, 10, 15 years ago to today's problems, if in fact things are different now. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what happened, with people saying about Netflix, that'll never work. But you can't do this. You can't, because the conditions weren't right 5 years ago for it to happen. Back when we were just starting Netflix, maybe 3 years in, there was a company called Pets.com with a little sock puppet, and they were spending millions of dollars, and it became this laughing stock of the totally ridiculous, irrational exuberance that, oh my gosh, you're going to take a 40-pound bag of dog food and you're going to try and ship that and make that and they laughed at him. And of course, now there's a company called Chewy, which is worth billions of dollars doing exactly that. In other words, the time could be right. The reason it hadn't worked before is you're right. People are doing it on a dial-up connection, or they're doing it on Skype or something that wasn't suited. And we've all kind of learned how powerful Zoom and Google Meets can be for doing this sort of thing. And also there's, of course, other really cool tools which didn't exist 5 years ago. I don't know if you've used the one where multiple people can now play together.
I've seen something on that, yes.
How cool is that? A bunch of my friends are musicians, and they do these things all simultaneously, and they address the latency. And anyway, I'm saying you might be right. It also could be the differentiator you just said, which is that this is not just an ability of some person who lives in this little town who, I'm a level 2 guitarist, I'm going to teach beginner guitar lessons, and they suck. Or they don't suck, but they're not a good teacher. You could say, no, what differentiates, I'll let you get a word in edgewise, I promise. Maybe, if you're nice. It could be that you picked right now, because you're a professional musician yourself, your network are professional musicians. So your instructor pool is great. But knowing that that is the differentiator that works, or at least saying I've got to figure out whether that's the differentiator that works, is a key piece of it. In other words, there's all kinds of stuff like that, which is this one-off? I'm looking for a class. Is this a master class where basically I go in and do one class with this person just to work in a small technique? Or is the basis of it a long-term relationship where I can do weekly lessons? As you know, from the offline world of music lessons, there's a million things. And if you don't have a pretty good idea which is the little combinations of features and offers and pricing and positioning that are making it work right now, then you're really starting from scratch. And
Sure.
What you don't want to, especially since it is not a new idea, that you have to be really careful. You recognize that it's not just that you're doing it, it's that you're doing something different that hasn't worked for other people. Because if you don't know what here's a summary, here's the big quote. If you don't know what holes people have fallen in before you, you're risk falling in the exact same hole yourself.
My question would be, how do you figure that out as someone with as much business experience as you have? And you said you've had so much experience that you can kind of quickly identify things like this. For someone new like me, what process should I go about to kind of figure these things out and to see what I have that the other businesses don't have?
So two things. Number one is you have to understand the history. You have to dig a little bit. You have to ask around. You've got to find other people who've tried to do virtual music lessons before, and you have to find out what happened. For example, and again, listen, you may not be able to do these things, but you asked, and I'll tell you, and you can pick the ones that are possible or not possible. You mentioned a company which does recorded lessons for people, the drum company, and I know you can do that for almost anything these days. Was that always their plan? Did they start that way, or did they start with the person goes, "Oh God, it's so great to talk to you. It's amazing because originally our idea was, why do we record it? Let's do real live lessons." And then you're going to go, listen, because then they're going to go, and then here's what happened. And you're going to go, oh shit, yeah. Okay. And that just saves you falling in that same hole. Or you're going to find someone who you hear about this guy who actually did it, or this person, and she says, oh yeah, we did this, and I found these two great people. But at the time, it was because everything was closed, and they couldn't do their real in-person lessons, and so they were happy to do a lesson for $60. But not when they could all of a sudden do the in-person ones for $300. Then they didn't want to do them for $60. I mean, I'm making up the numbers. I have no idea what lessons cost these days. But you find out that dynamic. Or you realize that you have this two-sided market, which is a gross imbalance of supply and demand. You go, for example, each of your teachers can conceivably teach 20 students, maybe, depending upon how much time a week they want to spend on this, 10 students. If they're really professional, if they're working, they don't want to spend 40 hours a week teaching. Maybe they have 10 students, something like that, whatever the number, So you go, okay, if I want to have 100,000 students eventually, holy shit, I need 10,000 teachers. Or I need some way to pick people who aren't professional musicians but are professional music teachers. Well, that's different. And then you bump into someone who goes, yeah, the problem is what people love is being able to study with the person who plays on Broadway. But I couldn't get many of those. In other words, what works on small scales doesn't work always in big scales. And I'm not saying yours won't. I'm saying if you can find people who in the past have bumped into these problems, it saves you having to bump into them and allows you to pick a different course based on the learnings of other people. So that's the first one. That's kind of this research phase. you don't not do what you're doing, but you learn as much as you can, again, to avoid falling in those holes. All right, the second thing is you've got a big advantage, which is you have an ongoing, albeit small, business. And the reason that's such an amazing advantage is you've got built-in people that you can talk to. I mean, if you were starting from scratch, so if you were on the show today and saying, I'm thinking of starting A, the first thing I'd say to you is I want you to go out and interview as many people who say they might want to learn an instrument or get better at their instrument as you can. And I want you to talk to them in depth. What are they looking for? What works? What doesn't work? What are they scared about? What kind of person do they, you want to understand what problem they're having. Because remember, I started this whole discussion off by asking you, start me off by saying what problem you were trying to solve. And we kind of got to that. But you kind of stumbled into this, again, almost by happenstance. Not because you started out from this premise. Because the premise could have been one of two. It could have been, I knew all these friends who really wanted to learn music, and there just was no good way to do it because they're in little towns in Germany. Or you could have said, oh no, the problem I'm trying to solve is most professional musicians only work 6 hours a week. And they're always trying to, and despite the fact of the Rolling Stones making $1 million a show, most of us barely scrape by, and that we need to augment, and this is the way to solve that problem. So what I'm saying is that you don't need to go out and do those interviews of strangers. You don't need to call people up randomly and try to interrogate them. You've got built-in customers who not only you have permission to talk to, but they've taken that first step of raise their hand by saying, I do want to do this program, and I love it, and here's why. And here's what I don't like, and here's the reason I'm drawn to it. And here's what level of musician I am. And here's what I'm expecting. And you can do the exact same set of interviews with the people who are currently teaching. What's working for you? What's not working for you? Do you want more hours? Do you want less hours? Is it better to have master class with their one-offs? Or would you rather make it a little bit less money but have it be something which is a regular weekly gig or every other week or once a month? In fact, which should it be? Weekly or every other week or once a month? In other words, you can begin understanding the problem you're solving. And gosh, this is a great topic. And I'll shut up in a second, I promise.
No, I love this. I love it.
You're building a two-sided marketplace, which is you are not providing the lessons. What you're doing is connecting people who want lessons with people who can provide lessons. It's a two-sided market. And those are really tricky because usually it's an uneven dynamic. Whereas it's really easy. So in this case, we call it a demand side, which is the people who want the lessons, and supply side, who need to supply the lessons. And usually the big challenge for an entrepreneur building a two-sided market is figuring out which one is going to be the harder one to fill. So if you, for example, said the problem is there's 1 million people who want to teach, 1 million professional musicians who want to teach, but boy, it's really hard to find people who want to take the lessons. Then you go, okay, my challenge is if I find the people who want lessons, it'll attract the instructors in droves. Or you go, God, I've got hundreds of thousands of people who would love to take lessons from these professional musicians. There just aren't very many of them who want to teach like that. And then you know which side you have to solve. So part of your research phase is figuring out which side of the network is your scarcity going to be on so you can make sure you focus your attention on solving that problem. Because if you solve one, usually the other one comes.
If I had to guess, I think it's going to be more of a challenge to find quality teachers than finding people who want to take lessons. I think at the quality, I have 5 teachers right now, and they're all stellar. So continuing to find top-notch teachers for the demand of students that want to take lessons, if I had to guess.
Right. Yeah, I would think you're probably right. But knowing that is just one of the critical things you need to realize as you're trying to scale, which is that my challenge is going to be attracting great teachers. And so as you begin designing your system, you're thinking, what will it take? What will I need? How much revenue will I need to generate for these people? How hard is it going to be for them to bring it on board? You just know what you really have to work on solving for. And it's going to be solving for, if that's the case, it's solving for that.
Sure.
Where you are now is fascinating because you're right. You've demonstrated that there is something there. People are doing it. It's growing by itself. Like, in order to decide how you take it into the next level, it's answering some of these big questions, which is really, really understanding, number one, what's been done before, so you don't fall those problems. Number two, what problem are you solving and for whom? And that's where this has got to come. And then three, all right, now that I kind of know that, how do I do that? Which is, how do I build a system that really attracts and retains great instructors? And once I have that, it's not going to be a problem at all for me to find the students for them.
No, I do love what you said about, because I haven't really thought about that as much as about doing my research on the market out there. What's worked, what hasn't worked, why don't I see a big Netflix type virtual music school? And that is definitely something to think about, and just really researching what's been done before. And like you said, the hole they fell into, maybe I can avoid it. And yeah, I think just what interests me is I can see it, like what you said something that really stuck with me, like through just perseverance, getting to 50 students or even 500 students is possible, but taking it to maybe 10,000 students or 500,000 students is a whole nother realm. And I'm just wondering, do you see this as a business that is going to be more of just a mom and pop, maybe 500 students, 600 students, or do you see this potentially being something that could be bigger?
The quick answer is I haven't the slightest idea.
Okay.
And I don't understand. I don't know that market. But part of it, that is for you to really know. I mean, those numbers exist. How many music teachers are there in the United States? How many students does each music teacher have? Those numbers are probably findable. And your guess, of course, is once you say, well, for everyone who's willing to get in the car, drive to the music store, go to that little dumpy room in the back, and sit with their trombone, and you go, there's probably 10 people who've always wanted to learn the trombone, but did not want to go through all that bullshit. So then you can get rough guesses of what is out there. And part of the trick is going to be we can get into the tactics of it all, which is, how do you recruit people? Do your instructors have responsibility for finding students? You finding people? Is there some viral techniques? Oh, can't believe I didn't even think about this. So I was saying, go out and find all these people who've tried this or are doing this, so you can learn from them. How different do you think this is from other categories? For example, personal trainers, instructors of any type. Okay, listen, I'll give you the quick. Well, no, that was a rhetorical question. You can answer if you have one. But just this morning, okay, I did my workout with my personal trainer, who I've been working with for this particular one, maybe a year and a half, and I've never met him. It's entirely done virtually.
Sure.
And the company's called Future Fitness, for those folks out there. Wouldn't it be interesting for someone who's thinking about building a virtual business in music to maybe deeply understand how Future does it with personal trainers?
I'm just writing this down. This is great. Yes. And I've kind of toyed with that idea about, well, I'm doing music, but there's a whole nother world out there. I thought about master class, where they offer, it's a cooking class and an acting class and all these different categories. And that is a fun idea to toy with.
But they don't do what you're talking about
No,
doing.
no, you're
They're
right.
doing
It's a
more
stock
like,
video. Yes.
they're doing Drumtopia, whatever you called it.
Exactly. Yeah, Drumeo. Exactly. Yes.
Drumeo. Good one.
Yeah, it is the name. It is the name. Yeah.
No, I understand. What you want to do is don't want to find people who are teaching in those types of ways. You want to find people who are teaching in the way that you think you've stumbled upon as a great way to do this. Mm-hmm. And because, for example, I mean, just to pick on Future for a little bit, you look at what you try and figure out what ratio, how many students one of their trainers can train, how many trainees they can train. And I do know the number, which I don't want to talk about on live like this, but it's surprisingly big because they've used automation to augment it. It's a really interesting model. And you look at what techniques they use to attract and retain new customers, their referral programs. But this is all. It's not free, but for the price of you see, you're a musician. You're probably all scrawny and out of shape, and you.
Oh, nice! Thanks. That makes me feel good. Yeah.
But sorry for the musician stereotype, especially. And listen, I've been really nice. I have not told any drummer jokes.
No, you're right. I deserve one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you deserve one. What do you call a drummer without a girlfriend? Homeless? There you go. You've heard that one.
That's true. I'm happy my girlfriend just left. She'd have loved that. She's like, he's right. He's right.
No, but anyway, so listen, sign up for Future.
Sure.
You know what I mean? See what it's like. How do they onboard? How do they make this all work? But you don't need to do Future because it might be too expensive as a research tool. But there are other places who do that, and you can become a polymath because you're now taking online classes in yoga, and you're doing online classes in fitness, and you're doing online classes in juggling, and you're looking at every friggin' school out there that's doing what you're trying to do and seeing how they do it to make yourself smarter about how they market, how they support, how they bill, how they charge.
Sure. That's great.
And then, listen, what I have to hold myself back from doing here is going into the details, because what you're talking about doing is fascinating to me in terms of, do you do a la carte? Do you do packages of 5? Do you do subscription, et cetera, et cetera? We'll go down that path a little bit later. All right, so Dustin, I've given you a ton to think about here. I have not given you where do I go from here. In the true Yoda fashion, the answer is inside yourself. Once you educate yourself about all these pieces, where you know what's happened before, what others in the industry are doing, when you've interviewed the students and the instructors, once you've really learned what these pain points are, you'll know where you go from here.
The next steps.
You'll go, wow, it's all instructor based. Every time I find an instructor, it's easy for me to find the students for them. And in fact, the instructor finds the students. I mean, so who knows? But it'll grow. You'll see once you get it right, it'll grow organically, and then we can have our follow-up call about how you really put the step on the gas. But you do not want to step on the gas until you really understand what you're building. And that's the piece that I'm suggesting you put in place here.
And you would say continue to grow and get students and teachers, but while doing that, do a deep dive into the research of other companies that are doing the same thing I'm doing and learn as much as I can about them to apply to the business model I've already started.
Exactly. In other words, you're not ready to go from 50 students to 500 students yet. Or maybe you are. You're definitely not ready to go to 5,000 students yet. You don't understand enough what the sweet spots are. You don't understand enough what works in terms of finding people, which you don't know which is the short side of your two-sided network. You think you do, but you don't know that for sure. And part of that will come out of the interview process. how important is it for you to be a professional musician? Because then that becomes your marketing. The only school where you learn from professional working musicians. Not
sure.
Our instructors are not teachers; they're musicians, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, the way to market it.
Or you do it the other way. You go, no, our instructors are not professional musicians; they're professional teachers. Our objective is to have you learn, not brag. But which way of those two you go? Well, it depends on what you learn.
I have one more question for you.
Yes, sir.
As far as taking investment, I haven't taken anything. I'm just building it on my own. Is there a point with the business where you feel like it would be appropriate to take some type of investment and to have more capital to work with for research and for these things we're kind of talking about?
Certainly, and you're not at a bad place to do that. And this is a whole subject for a whole nother podcast episode. But one piece is that be careful what you wish for, because once you take money, you have obligations. Because people mostly are not going to give it to you because they like you or because they want to see you change the world in this No, I want my money back, and I want it back times 100. And if you take that money, you now have a moral obligation to do the things that are required to make that happen, which is going to push you to grow at a rate you may not want to, which is why I started off this entire conversation by saying, what does Dustin want? I love that. I mean, my thing is, yes, up or out, yes, home runs or nothing. But I love that world. But I'm a professional at it. And it's entirely appropriate for that not to be. You go, no, I love my life. I just would like to have, this is a fascinating model. I could see this being a great lifestyle business. Then you need to be careful about how you manage that. So that's the first thing to think about when you're taking money, is be careful what you wish for. Mm-hmm. The second thing, you should have some very, very clear objectives for the money. And usually the objectives for raising money is, I have some uncertainty in my business and I need the money to answer that next question. Yours could be, I have a model that's working at 50. I'd like to raise the money to take it to 5,000. And then what that will teach me is, how do I acquire customers? How do I bring on musicians? Can I bring on enough musicians? Can I scale my platform enough? I don't know what the questions are, but you have to have it's not just, I want to take some money because I want to do what I'm doing with someone else's money. You really should say, what this money will do is allow this business to learn the following. Our premise is that we can grow to 5,000 customers, and this will get us there. And once we're there, we should be 3 to 5 times more valuable. And so therefore, you, Mr. Investor, will have gotten a 3 to 5x return on your money just in the next 18 months. And then you're going to go to a different investor and go, hey, we proved we can market to grow ourselves to 5,000. The next one is, can we fill in the blank?
Sure.
So it's not inappropriate. You've got some there. You've demonstrated there is something working. And that's a good point to say. That usually I'm coaching people to not raise a penny until they have some evidence that there's a there. And you've got a there. You're now wondering, what's next?
And I love, because obviously before this call, I was just wondering what we're going to talk about. But that bit of information about just taking a deep dive into research, I think is going to be so helpful, and learning from these companies, and not just music companies, but fitness companies, maybe acting studios, on the way they do it. And I think that's going to be so valuable.
Yeah, and again, you're doing what you're doing, and you're going to keep doing what you're doing, and you can even begin being, but by definition, you can be more aggressive about what you're doing. You can try and, how many instructors do you have?
5.
Okay, great. So you go, over the next 6 months, I'm going to bring on 5 more or 10 more. And say, okay, what is my process of bringing on 10 more? What rate? Do I do 1 a month for 10 months? How about 2 months for 5 months? And I'm going to see if I can do that. And then I write out for myself, for every 2 that I bring on, how many students do I need? How am I going to find those students? And you that your goal for the next 6 months is then I'm going to go to, let's see, you have 5 instructors, 10 students apiece. Is that what you are right now?
Roughly. I mean, 5 instructors, 50 students. Some have more than others, but we can say that.
So here's your assignment then. To say to yourself, okay, I want to go to, I want to bring on 10 more instructors in the next 6 months, and I want to ramp it from 10 a person to 15 a person.
So
Or 12 a person. Whatever.
12
No, you'll have 15 totals, and you'll have 12 apiece. So you'll have whatever that, I can't do that math, 180.
Sure.
180. Yeah. So something like that. And just doing that gradual phase, you'll have to start in advance and go, what does that mean? Not by going 10 at once, but you're going to ramp.
Sure. And I do that. I mean, at the beginning of this year, I started with around 20 students, and my goal by the end of the year was 50, which I've reached. And I already made my goal for next year, which is going to be 100 students. So I definitely do that. But I like your goal even better because it's kind of a higher number.
And it's going to require, it'll lay out your tactics for you, and you'll begin learning it. But back to the raising money one, that's the kind of thing you do. You go, this money is going to help us bring on 10 more instructors and increase my average students to instructor from 10 to 15. Or 10 to 20, whatever the math says is economically viable here. And here's how I'm going to do it, and this money is to prove that we can do that. And then you do it, and then 12 months from now you go, all right, now we're going to bring on 100, and we're confident that I have a model now for bringing on instructors. And the investors will go, wait, that worked when you were just going from 5 to 15. Different to go from 15 to 165.
Sure.
But you go, no, that's what this round's going to prove. Anyway, all right, I got to go, Dustin, but this has been really interesting. This is the one that I would kind of love to dig in on at some point. So you've got to get back in touch with me. We'll talk again maybe in 6 to 9 months. I'm curious to hear what you've learned, and more importantly, what progress you may have made.
Well, thanks again for having me on the show. It's been so valuable talking to you. All your advice has been incredible, and I definitely look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, Dustin. Well, thanks again, and best of luck.
Thank you.